Hi, and welcome to BioStock's Health and Wealth podcast. Today we are joined by Sten, CEO of Cereno Scientific, and Rahul Agrawal, CMO and Head of R&D for that same company. We will talk about what sets Cereno apart, how to position a drug on the market, and how Sten and Rahul are such a good combination to drive Cereno forward. Welcome to you, and welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, as you are the CEO, after all, Stan, I thought we'll start with you. If we could just start by setting the scene a little bit. What is Cereno's mission?
Well, our mission is to provide value to patients in need. And our platform is that we are moving to untap the potential of epigenetic modulation, specifically to cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases. And we are focusing initially on rare diseases. And so, for instance, our lead program is in the rare disease pulmonary arterial hypertension that mostly affect women and that has a very short life expectancy upon diagnosis. And there's a huge need for new agents to this patient group, drugs that can prevent the pathological process that they are in. So we're driving our platform of 3 drugs in development to patient value and patient needs.
So you're working within cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases.
Yes.
Right? Both huge disease areas, right?
Yeah, they are huge. And I think that, for instance, cardiovascular, which is the biggest cause of death for humanity, has been to some extent ignored or neglected when it comes to investment in light of all the investment going to cancer oncology field. So as you might have seen, there's a shift back towards cardiovascular diseases, not the least the obesity focus and the successes there by companies such as Novo and Lilly and others following, but to cardiovascular disease in general. So you've seen several deals between biotech and major pharma in picking up new, very interesting concept mode of actions, new drug development programs into the cardiovascular space. And specifically Cereno, it's a big field, and we have agents in our portfolio that can prevent thrombosis, we've documented, without causing bleed, which is a very big need in that field. Thrombosis is the biggest cause of death for us people on the planet. So that's a big, big field, but we are focusing initially on rare diseases. And that narrows it down a lot, which benefits a company like ours. So the capital needs to bring products forward to get them approved is less, the time is less, and the pricing is pretty well protected, and also exclusivity based on the Orphan Act that has been agreed to in most markets, US, Europe, etc. So we have chosen rare diseases, even though pulmonary and respiratory are major areas.
So that's it's a strategic choice to go into the rare diseases.
Yeah, it's a strategic choice, but we never work out of marketing as the primary choice, strategic. We work out of technology and how our technology can benefit the patient. So our technology, as it happens, epigenetic modulation through HDAC inhibition, 2 of our programs are focused on that. And that technology, as it happens, have been documented very well by researchers around the globe. So there are almost 600 articles documenting the characteristics and the benefits to various diseases, mostly then in preclinical work, in animal proof of concept studies, etc., all published information. And that, as it happens, fits very well to pulmonary arterial hypertension, the characteristics of HDAC inhibition. So characteristics such as anti-inflammatory, ability, antifibrotic, the ability to both halt and reverse vascular remodeling of the vessels in the body and the heart itself. And in addition, the ability to lower pressure, both in the pulmonary arteries and in the systemic. And in addition, the ability to prevent thrombosis without increasing bleeding risk. So this fits a lot of cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases. We have picked pulmonary arterial hypertension because it's a very progressive disease, and you would be able to show benefits to this patient, and that would be of tremendous value if you could halt or even reverse this pathological process. And that fits very well with these characteristics that I mentioned our drug has.
And if you look at how this is treated today, then how does your approach differ? Is there a treatment?
Yeah, there are treatments, of course, and they've been successful in prolonging life expectancy, for instance, from 2.5 to around 7.5 years from diagnosis. But they work in like an old-fashioned way, if you will. So in heart failure in general, historically, 30 years back or more, the physicians and the doctors work more like plumbing and pump and plumbing. So it was diuretic and inotropic agents. Diuretics could get rid of the fluid from the body, and inotropic agents could strengthen the heart pounding, the power. But it turns out that now there are maybe 7 agents used in left heart failure with various mode of actions controlling hormonal cascades, etc., to a huge benefit to these patients, both life expectancy and quality of life. When you look at pulmonary arterial hypertension, which is our lead program again, those agents being used are more like the old ones. So in this disease, the pressure in the pulmonary artery between the right heart and the lungs goes up because the vessel there, the vascular pulmonary artery, grows narrow because the muscle inside it grows a lot and fast and gets less elastic. So what traditionally has been used and is being used today is drugs that can dilate these vessels, so make them relax and dilate so it becomes easier for the heart to pump. But they do not halt the progressiveness of the disease, the pathological remodeling. That's where we come in, and the more new research is to find drugs that can halt and maybe reverse this remodeling and then help the heart to pump. Because what happens, why patient dies here, is that the right heart eventually fails and you die of right heart failure. So pulmonary arterial hypertension eventually is a right heart failure disease, and that's how you die. So by halting or reversing this remodeling, we will be able to, we believe, to save the heart, extend life, and improve quality of life for these patients.
We will return to your candidate and your studies a bit later on, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about you now, Sten. You obviously have long experience in this field, and experience from big pharma, but you have a degree in chemistry to begin with, don't you, from here, from Lund?
Yes, from Lund. So, I'm a curious person, and I chose chemistry because I found it to be an exciting field. I wanted to know more about it, and really my wish was to understand why we become sick or ill as people and humans, and maybe understand what one could do about it.
But you didn't go into medical school, you went for chemistry instead.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned to Rahul here when we were driving through Lund and we went past the biomedical center and medical faculty buildings. When I studied here was a long time ago. It was in the early 80s I started here. And I eventually studied chemistry with focus on physiology and biochemistry eventually. And I wanted to study cancer, actually, oncology, but I couldn't find that in the chemistry faculty. my wish was to understand chemistry first, biochemistry, and then study into the medical field. But there was no bridge between chemistry and the medical faculty at that time. And that's why they eventually created the Biomedical Center in Lund. So I was asked to do a PhD here by a professor and invited and so, but eventually I declined because that would have kept me in the lab for a long time. And I wanted to work more with the diseases, and was advised to actually go and work with a pharmaceutical company on the other side, so to speak. And I joined Astra as a sales rep in 1984 already. And the person who advised me said, you know, you have some understanding of biochemistry, etc. now. If you go and work on the sales, marketing, and that field now, you will be in between scientific discoveries and the patients that eventually will benefit from them. And that will put you in a position where you will have a lot of leverage in this field. And that guy, I think, was right. That advice was very good for me to get at that point.
Yeah, because that's the great divide, isn't it? Like, do you stay in the lab, do you stay in academia, or do you go into industry?
Yes, exactly. And to propel just forward a few years, I was asked to join Monsanto's pharma company in Chicago when I was 29 years old, and be a product manager for a product that was sold around the world. And Searle was the only company that had that product, and it was used in heart failure. And I was just given a telephone, and, you know, make yourself useful.
A telephone, so this was some time ago then?
Yeah, it was in '89. And as it turned out, you know, me and my colleague, and now we're talking about not creating a non-gap between science and market. So I joined up with my medical college and said we should work on this concept together, which was to work on the hypothesis that utilizing the blocker of aldosterone, which my product actually did then, but use it better in heart failure. And we postulated that we would improve survival and improve quality of life. And we did this in the early 90s. And eventually, we were able to pursue that trial despite our heads of R&D didn't want to do it and so on. I actually paid out of my marketing budget globally.
Took the money from your budget to pay
get
for
that
the survival
done.
study.
Yes. And our chairman of the scientific advisory at Cereno today was the principal investigator that we asked if he could be for this trial, the RALS trial. And it was published in New England Journal of Medicine in '99 with plus 30% improved survival and improved quality of life. And so we took an old concept and repurposed it for a better use and for the benefit of patients. So that's, and we were able to do it by me sitting in a marketing function, but being very technology interested, and connecting with my scientist and my partner in crime, so to speak, Dr. Alfonso Perez, and a very, very smart person. And he was featured in Wall Street Journal by this success, eventually when this was published in '99.
I was going to ask you, because I know that you've had a study on the front page of Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, it was actually the front page of the marketing section, but that's the second section of the paper. And
good enough.
Yeah, but it was the title was The Physician Who Didn't Take No for an Answer. By that time, I had left for AstraZeneca and was recruited back to lead the secondary prevention products, including a beta blocker. But the reason the title was The Physician Who Didn't Take No for an Answer was, if you read the story, it highlights that the R&D and the senior management didn't want to fund it.
But why did they not want to fund it?
Because it was a drug that was on the market already, and the divide between R&D and market traditionally, historically, has been that markets sell and make profit, and R&D is a cost center. But we connected the marketing function technology driven with these scientific. The other aspect of this is traditionally R&D functions are getting their golden stars for new chemical entities, not repurposing. So the cost center is expected to provide new things. Most of them fail. But there are some really good drugs, of course, coming out of R&D. But not having the connection with the patients in need sometimes create a gap. And we were able to close it then to the benefit of the patients. And I actually was able to do this together with colleagues at Astra also, basically based on the time spent in heart failure, and then joining Astra with the beta blocker that I actually started working with in '84 as the new sales rep. I suddenly was in charge of it globally, again from a marketing function. But Astra had already then understood that it's good to have the marketing people in R&D. Astra is historically known for being very good at life cycle management. So utilizing the products and investigating in new diseases and indications. When I joined in '95, Astra had the best beta blocker, and it had patent life for another 12 years. R&D wanted to close down the research on the product, but knowing what was possible to do in heart failure with hormonal control, I met and discussed this together with Gunnar Olsson, who's also at Cereno's board today. He was head of clinical operations and clinical research for the Astra globally. We decided to pursue another heart failure trial with a drug that was already used differently. It was actually prohibited, had a black box. It couldn't be pursued in heart failure. We still pursued it, and we were able to improve survival even with that approach, with the beta blocker in heart failure. So I'm telling this because, you know, there are the ability to see gaps in medicine, and then the ability to pursue it between minds that are maybe closer to the patients and others that are closer to science. Creating that platform can provide tremendous benefit to patients. And I think we have that ability now with Cereno, where in left heart failure that time, there was a big gap in hormonal control. And now, in right heart failure caused by pulmonary arterial hypertension, there is historically, the treatment is way behind left heart failure. So we have a tremendous opportunity with Cereno and other companies too, but to do something very different. And in this case, it's disease modification, and that's what we are pursuing.
So for you, your whole career seems to have sort of a theme of finding these gaps and then bridging the gap and how to position a drug.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's not necessarily intentional. It's the curiosity that's driving it, and the technology platform, the interest and the gravity towards the technology that has driven me into this. And sometimes preparedness meets opportunity equals luck, as they say.
So was it curiosity that maybe drove is too strong a word, but that made you leave Big Pharma and join Cereno? I know you joined the board in 2014.
Yes, I left Big Pharma earlier than that. I've been in other businesses. But yes, it was actually curiosity. I was not keen on running major departments and major functions. I wanted to be more focused on concepts and the ability to drive value, creating projects and new drugs. So that's what drove me. And that's also when I was asked to meet the founders of Cereno, and I was struck by the innovative thinking of that group, and Professor Sverker Jern, who founded the company, and their identification of epigenetic modulation through HDAC inhibition as something that could be very valuable. So I immediately were thinking that this could be something big.
You felt it.
I felt it, but we didn't have really any issued patents. We had basically no funding. I think there was a million Swedish kronor in the company, and the company had been helped by GU Ventures, so Gothenburg University holding at that time, but GU Ventures now, to just establish the company and some funds in. So yeah, but again, technology is the most important thing. Then you need to create your plan, and then of course followers to the vision. And ideally, the followers should have great experience and minds like Dr. Rahul Agrawal here, and others like Dr. Pitt and Gunnar Olsson, etc., who are involved in the company.
So first you were a board member, and then you became CEO. How did that transition come about?
Well, I was frustrated that this idea, I became frustrated that this idea didn't have any funding. And I wanted to capture fund and get it into the company and push the vision. And at that time, because of the early stage of the company and the lack of real VC company available or capital available here in Sweden, the stock market had opened up for early companies, for startups.
Because at this point, Cereno was not a listed company.
No, it was private. So I wanted to create a business plan and get it capitalized. And after waiting almost a year for the board to...
That's still quite patient.
I wanted to be the CEO and run it. And we all agreed then. And so 6 months later, we had funded the first fund in. And less than a year after that, we were on the stock market. And we had around 30 million Swedish in the company. So we could start working.
So they were quite happy you put your hand up and said, make me the CEO?
I hope so. I think so.
So with this, your background, which is a little bit more maybe brand and commercially driven than you sometimes see in biotech, how has that shaped the strategy that you use at Cereno today?
Well, actually, I would say that again, I am actually more scientifically driven than my titles have shown. And I think also my career shows that. So my biggest successes hasn't been marketing. It's been initiating new concepts or driving them in cardiovascular disease. So I think that is. But I think if you want to highlight anything in relation to marketing, is to be able to maybe see the need at the patient level early on, and not focusing on the concept per se initially, but start with the gap out in the patient and then connecting the dots.
So it's these that you have a dual perspective almost with the science, I think so. But then...
Yeah, I think so. And I think the people, many of the great minds, passionate people, I would say all in Cereno, we're 10 people in the core team. I think we're about 100 people working with the company at the moment, at least, but 10 people leading our projects and creating our values. They are all passionate about what we do, and they all have this double experience. It could be PhD or a physician with an MBA. With an economic degree, experience from both sides, but a strong pathos and passion for science and medicine.
And one such person is of course Rahul, who I think you brought him into the company.
Well, somebody tipped me off.
So you did not know him
Headhunters call us all the time because they think Cereno is a great place for new people to go to. And this time I was a bit frustrated. It's another one calling me. And he said, there's this person that's available, the capacity that really fits Cereno. And I was, send me, a CV that's marked out and a blind one. And I said, this is fantastic. I need to meet this person. And we set up a meeting, and we met then. And since then, we'd had a love affair, yeah?
Like a bromance.
Yes, yeah.
A biotech bromance.
He's fantastic.
Well, after that, of course, we have to talk to you for a bit now. You're a good example of what Sten was just saying about this dual background, because you're a medical doctor, right?
I'm a cardiologist by training.
But then you chose to cross the great divide into industry as well, then? Absolutely,
yes.
Why did you make that choice?
So actually my background is I initially always wanted to pursue a university career. I did my medical studies in Germany and the final year in New York at Cornell. And then I wanted to pursue cardiology, and I was at the university at the Charité, did of course the clinical work, but also research work and teaching, and I enjoyed that wholeheartedly. But I very much realized that there is more to medicine than just the hospital work. And this is something which has been actually one of my drivers. How can one make a difference on a larger scale? And I think we're living in very exciting times, especially in the life science sector. While initially we were managing patients and their diseases, now we are in the phase where we want to transform and maybe tackle the root cause. Some of the things I also, by the way, found with Cereno and talking to Sten in our first talks. And that curiosity led me to explore other fields in medicine, and that was, of course, the pharmaceutical industry.
Am I right thinking you also worked for Astra in some capacity? So that's another common denominator?
Yeah, but we were never at the same time. So I started with an Italian company, Menarini, built up a cardiovascular group for the German association there. Then I went to a global organization at Bayer, also in R&D. And at that time I flipped over to the commercial side after having completed my MBA as well. And I really enjoyed both the aspects, looking at both the worlds, but looking at the entire picture. We often, in the old pharma world, I should say, were very much siloed. Research here, preclinical here, commercial here, and sales there. But I think we need to work together because we have a common goal. We need to have a common goal, how to bring medicines from the bedside and from scientific point of view to the patients. And as I always like to say, medicine is only worthwhile if it reaches and is accessible for patients. So with that in mind, I thought if I can combine from my own qualifications a few of the worlds, then I can create value and really drive some of the processes. And I've been very fortunate that I've been a part of this transformation.
But you also ended up leaving Big Pharma and going into a smaller company.
That is very true. And actually that came during my time at AstraZeneca, where I was on the commercial side, or as Sten was saying before, on the darker side. But I think it's just as equally exciting. And there I had the big fortune of being involved in the integration of several biotechs. I saw the tail end of a biotech, and I saw that how a small, dedicated, passionate group can create a lot of value. A lot of value for patients, but also in dollars, if I may say so, because Astra did give a lot of amounts and value to those companies. So I wanted to get to know a biotech company from more or less its beginning. And then I started looking around and was fortunate enough to find first a German biotech company, which was very active in the microRNA field. By the way, the microRNA discoverers just received the Nobel Prize last year. And we had a very exciting platform there. And my job as the CMO and Chief Development Officer was to bring this drug into a further clinical stage, and which we did, I think, very successfully, built up the R&D and clinical team, very close collaboration, of course, with the commercial aspects that are part of it, and making a difference for patients.
So again, about bridging the gap, right? Seeing the gap and bridging it.
Absolutely, but also really trying to make a difference for patients, not just managing their disease, but transforming, hopefully, and tackling the root cause. That was the case with cardio. That was the biotech I was there before. And also then with Cereno, when I first met Sten and had the first talks, and I saw on the one hand, we were coming from different sides, but we had very many commonalities in what we wanted to achieve and what we wanted to do.
So circling back a little bit to cardio there, because we have to talk about the Novo Nordisk acquisition, because that must be something that everyone dreams of. Cardio was acquired by Novo in a deal worth up to $1.1 billion US. Could you tell us a little bit about your take? What was it like? What do you take away from that journey? Why was it successful?
I think there were several factors. Of course, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of dedicated teamwork, and we should never forget the team, which is often in the background. That is a part of it. On the other hand, it was the idea and the vision, also the leadership. We had a very strong leadership and dedicated leadership, and it was not like we met Novo and it was the first company. We pitched to several companies, tried to sell our idea, sell why we are excited about not only about compound and platform, but what difference can it make for patients, and with that create value. So we did that, and we then of course got into the talks, and then as it happens, things go very fast. And of course we were fortunate enough then to being bought over by Novo Nordisk, and shortly around that time, that's where we met. And then I decided to continue the journey with an equally exciting company.
Well, I have to ask, did you see any similarities between Cardio and Cereno? Was that what attracted you to? Or was it Sten's brilliant first call? Or?
It's a mixture of several things. Absolutely, of course, it is the platform, the company, the idea, but it is often and nearly always also the personal mixture. And of course, I was very much taken into the idea, and Sten is a great, I should say not influencer is the wrong word, but very convincing. And he is, of course, very passionate about Cereno and what he has been doing over the last few years. And he captivated me with the passion, but also with the idea on how we can make a difference with the HDAC inhibition, with epigenetic modulation. I, by the way, previously was already involved in rare and orphan indications when I was working at Bayer and at AstraZeneca. And at that time, we had developed a drug at Bayer, which was more of a so-called symptomatic treatment, vasodilating drug. And here, many years later, I hear Sten, who has a very different approach. And this is something which excited me as well. And while, as I was saying before, we were coming from different angles, we had, I think, and we have the same passion. And that's why I think we complement each other. He is coming, as he was saying, he's science-driven, technology-driven, but of course coming more from the commercial aspect, he has to. I am coming from the R&D aspect, but I'm also commercially driven. So I think that is a nice complementary match.
Yeah, I'm really struck by that in the conversation about duality, but also how how your whole team seems to complement each other. What would you say to that, Sten? How does your different backgrounds sort of help you?
Yeah, I think, throughout my career, so to speak, I've always found a really strong platform in connecting with the scientific leader of a concept. So the combination between myself and such a leader has been working very well in my life. And I think we have it here now. In Cereno, there are several people that, I have that connection with. I think Rahul is the last person. And in that sense, before then and still was Björn Dahle, the Chief Scientific Officer. And we also hired Nick Oakes, who is head of preclinical, etc. So I think that is a very strong position to have. So, for instance, when we meet and talk about the company with you, or we talk with the pharma majors nowadays about what we are doing and where we are, it's a very complementary situation, because on the other side of the table is the same. You have a leader of the whole cardiovascular business or pulmonary business for a major pharma, and there's not just a head of R&D or whatever, it's a head of franchise or commercial or head of BD. So I think that is a good platform to have. When it comes specifically to Rahul here and the journey we had at Cereno at that time, we found ourselves being propelled with the propelling three programs, and one of them was into a phase 2 trial that we have completed, and we saw that it looks like this is really going to work. At the same time, we had our second program soon going into the clinic, that too, and eventually going in also to phase 2. So we needed a strong leader for the R&D efforts in our 3 programs. And Rahul is a humble guy, so he hasn't told you that he's run the biggest trial ever that AstraZeneca has pursued. So, so he has probably 250,000 patients in his career as a head of clinical programs for various pharma. So that experience, so both the pharma and market and franchise ownership, but the clinical, the understanding of how to run, set up, run, and close, and analyze, etc. programs that are either local or global is something that fits with Cereno very well. So I was so happy when we agreed that to do this together. Yeah.
So this dual perspective then between the clinic and the commercial, it really strengthens Cereno's position going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's another aspect here is that, cardiovascular disease is a complex matter to approach. So you have really to have a strong holistic view and understanding of how the various functions work in the cardiovascular and in the body of a human. So when you address those diseases, it's seldom a target-specific approach. It's generally it can be, but you have to understand what you will upset or change in the body when you do that. So often you have actually to do animal work, and so not receptor work in the lab in a glass, but you have actually to do it into a functioning organism, and then eventually into the humans to see what's going on. So the understanding of cardiovascular business and what you can do, and specifically here, we are pursuing epigenetic modulation. So genetics is a hot, topic, right? The understanding of our DNA and what it means for the factory of proteins. So it's the map of protein production in the body, essential proteins that make the whole thing work. And epigenetics is actually if you will say it maybe easy, so it's readers, writers, and erasers of this map. And epigenetics is, with drugs, is how you can change what's gone wrong in this transcript, and we do that through HDAC inhibition. So it's a very modern approach, and we think it will be very valuable for patients.
Yeah, because I'm thinking we will start to wrap up a little bit here, and then we'll talk about where Cereno and your candidates are now. So the lead candidate, CS1, has completed a phase 2A study. What was the main takeaway sort of feedback what did you learn from that study?
Yeah. I think several things, and that is why we are excited. Number one, we should keep in mind that the disease we're approaching, pulmonary arterial hypertension, is a very progressive, deteriorating disease. That means it affects mainly women, middle-aged, and then they have a life expectancy of what Sten was saying, of around 7 years. That's not a long time. Most of the drugs that have been so far approved also have quite a lot of side effects, or their intake is not easy. So what we were looking for, and with the characteristics that we have with CS1, our lead compound, is it's an oral drug, relatively well tolerated, and we can give it, and that is the aim, give it once daily. And we can combine it with the others. So this trial, which was mainly safety and tolerability, that was the primary endpoint, but we also wanted to capture signals of efficacy. So what we did is we performed a trial on top of standard of therapy, because that is, of course, very important. We saw that there were, it was a very good safety and tolerability trial, so that the clinical steering committee also advised us to actually stop ahead of what we were planning with 30 patients already after 25 patients, which is, again, a very good sign. Number two, we also had several innovative methods included into the trial, and we wanted to really capture the signals, because what it makes it so debilitating is that of pulmonary arterial hypertension is that the right heart fails, so right ventricular failure. So what one wants to look at is, and if we are approaching, as I was saying before, we're not just treating symptoms like many of the drugs are, but trying to tackle the root cause. We wanted to see if we can maybe stop the progression or even reverse it. So we can, of course, in this smaller trial, capture maybe signals of that. What we saw is, on the one hand, that, and what we took a lot of prognostic indicators, like a REVEAL risk score, which has a high prognostic value in the risk scores. We looked at how are the patients feeling and functioning. This is what the FDA and EMA, the regulatory bodies in the US and in Europe, also demand, because that is, of course, very important. How are the patients doing? So we looked at that, and we saw already in the short period of 12 weeks very promising results already of an improvement regarding how the functions of patients are functioning and feeling. So quality of life, PAH SYMPACT it's called, which is an approved quality of life questionnaire. We looked at functional class. We looked at REVEAL risk score. But we also used the ultrasound of the heart, echocardiography, to evaluate how the right heart and the right ventricle is doing. And we saw already in the beginning, within these 12 weeks, that there was an improvement of the function of the right heart, which is something which is really exciting. And whenever we talk to potential, not only customers, but also opinion leaders, they really get excited about it, because what we saw is that some of the parameters, and now I'm getting into a little technical, apologies for that, one of the indicators with the highest prognostic value is so-called global longitudinal strain. That means how elastic, if you would like, is the right ventricle. And we see very good signs that either in a progressive deteriorating disease, either they are improving or are stable. A large part of the patients, very good sign. Same thing also with other signals. So we are really excited about that. And another sign of it is that half of the patients who had completed the trial wanted to also be a part, and the physicians wanted that, and the patients as well, in the so-called extended access program. That means we give the drug, the compound, CS1, to the patients on a longer period of time. So we have been doing that, and there are several patients in the trial, 10 patients all in all, and we are going to now evaluate how they're doing on the longer term. Again, something very, very exciting. And maybe I forgot something, Sten, then please feel free to add.
No, yeah, I think, no, you're doing it really well. So, no, I think that, yeah, so, you know, what you want to see when you add a drug to standard care, you want to see something, right? And what happened with one of our first patients in the study, an investigator contacted us and said, I don't believe what I'm seeing in my patient. The patient is almost normalized.
Because the improvement.
Yeah,
so
she was
great.
diagnosed 3 years earlier, 52 years old, if I remember correctly. She had triple therapy of these vasodilators we're talking about that does something useful in the beginning. But, eventually the disease catches up and, you deteriorate and then it loses in the right heart. You fail and you die, unfortunately. But so she came into the study 3 years after diagnosis. She was in New York Heart Class 2, which is, 1 is you don't really feel your disease. 4, there are 4 classes, you can't leave your bed. She was in Functional Class 2, which is like shortness of breath, tired, things like that. And she had triple therapy. She got our drug on top of this. After 3 months, we have moved her from functional class 2 to 1, hardly feeling her disease. And we had normalized her cardiac output. That's the ability of the heart to pump blood to the lung. And we have improved the resistance in the pulmonary vessel with 44% and so on. So the investigator said, I don't know, what's going on here. So she wanted to write an abstract to American Heart and present it, which was done, but we eventually decided we couldn't sit on this information for many months, so we communicated this finding to the market. The second thing that really happened here was, like Rahul was saying, we were contacted by investigators at the end of the trial saying, we don't want to lose the drug that you have, CS1.
They wanted to keep giving it to the patient.
Keep it to the patient. Can you please apply to the regulatory authorities, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, in this case in the US, because that's where we were running the trial. And please do that so we can continue using your drug. We don't want to let it go. If you don't do it, we will do it ourselves, because you can, as a physician, do it in individual application. We decided, of course, to pursue this. We submitted it Christmas, the day before Christmas Eve, to FDA, and it got approved quickly. And now, as Rahul was mentioning, half of the patients in our study actually have our drug long-term now. And this is a few years before the drug will eventually, we hope, be approved for use for many patients. So we are able to study now long-term effects, which is beneficial for us. But it just shows this is what you want to happen in a trial, that somebody else is telling you, look what I'm seeing in my patients.
Has that has that ever happened in any of the trials you've done? How common is it?
I don't know how common that actually is. I've seen the results in heart failure, from trials that I've been part of initiating and so on, which is fantastic. It's very hard to find a concept, a new way, and then develop it and see the benefits in patients. That's a long journey. So, the Cereno has been around since 2012. Professor Sverker started studying HDAC inhibition way before the foundation of the company. I have been with the company for 10 years now, so it's a long journey to see the benefit. And for the first time in man, we saw the benefit in this setting during our phase 2A trial. So the clinical, benefits, you can see parameters, but that doesn't necessarily translate to symptomatic improvement or well-being, such as in this case. And then, of course, added to that we were able to, with this tool that physicians are using in their daily practice, a validated risk score. So they gather around 12 parameters, I think, that are important to look at for the patient, so you can decide this is a risk patient, there's deterioration, high risk, and then they can tailor the treatment. So in that risk score, a definition or a measurement that was captured in our trial, we saw that in almost half the patients, 43%, we reduced the risk score with more than 1 point. If you do that in 3 months, like we did, you reduce the risk of mortality with 23%. So again, back to what Rahul was saying, what you want to achieve, and there's actually a paper out now in the Lancet Respiratory that has been, the authors are from the regulatory authorities, experts on pH around the world, clinical experts. The paper was published a few weeks back only, Lancet Longevity. It addresses the focus that new drugs and drug development should have in pH. It should be disease modification focus. If you do that, you need to measure and show improvement on prognostic value, on how the patient feels and how they function, and also hospitalization. So we were fortunate to have designed this trial ahead of that article and consensus. So we have captured signals of that into our trial, and with utilizing our new concept on patients on top of standard of care.
So exciting times for Cereno.
Yes, it is.
So as a final, well, again, we started with you, so we'll finish with you as well, Sten. If we look ahead a little bit, say, where do you want Cereno to be in a year, in terms of maybe the clinical study, but also strategic partnerships and so on?
Yeah, so, you know, when you're driving a biotech and you're driving drug development from a biotech standpoint, you have to make sure that you can do it alone. So most biotechs has as their strategy to partner up with a collaborator that is strong and has good capacity and the will to pursue this concept to the patient and provide the value. Such partnerships are most of the time the strongest and has the highest ability to actually deliver that value. So that's part of the strategic objectives for most biotechs, including Cereno. However, and we have that objective, and we are engaging, exposing our company and our drug development programs to those kind of partners, potential partners, and that's a fairly large part of our job now. And at the same time, you have to make sure that you can pursue your drug development to the point where that collaboration, you mature into that type of collaboration. And that depends on which field you're in, what the partners are looking to see, and also circumstances. So sometimes a deal can be made very quickly. Sometimes you can have a relationship for a year or longer, and maybe several years until you've come to the point where the potential partner says, we can't resist, let's do a partnership. So I think Cereno is pretty close to that kind of engagement. It can be a collaborative partnership before we do the next trial or after the next trial. So that's, that objective. So two objectives. One is partnering, which is a long-term objective for most biotechs. Second is to pursue your programs, to leverage the program, get more clarity on the safety, tolerance, and in our case, mostly efficacy. We believe our drug concept is going to be the best in class when it comes to safety and tolerance in pH. So the part of this ability then to operate towards those objectives is to continuously make sure that you secure capital for what you want to do. So within a year from now, we are moving ahead now. We have milestones coming up pretty close. So we have a Type C meeting, as it's called, to discuss with FDA now, 21st of April, the findings of our trial and also what we want to do as we move forward. So that's coming up, and we are hopeful and that's going to be a good meeting for us. In addition, we are concluding our phase 1 trial for a new chemical entity, CS014, which is a completely new drug that we have done a 5-year program to document and then get approval and then pursue the phase 1 trial. So that's completing now in June. We're actually completing the actual study now in April. So in June, July, we'll have top line from that one. In addition, we have long-term data from this compassionate use or extended access program. We're going to have a readout now also around the end of Q2. So there are 3 important milestones there.
So if we meet here again in a year and do another podcast, we'll have lots to talk about then.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking forward to that. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you so
much for having us.
No, it was a pleasure to talk to you both. And thank you so much for watching and listening.